Hello, welcome to Evangelistic Apologetics. This is an introduction to systematic Christian worldview. We are in part 2, the theory of creation. Part 1 is the truth of truth. It teaches the philosophy of knowledge and overall the philosophy of how to know the truth. And once we define the truth and find out the standard of truth, we are trying to present you the theory of creation and let you evaluate it. See if it is possibly the truth. And in the theory of creation, we have given you from 4 perspectives, actually 2, generally. According to the scripture, we have the literal view, which gives you a young earth creationism. We have the kind of stretched view, not literal view, and that gives you old earth creationism. And or evolution, theistic evolution. We found out the people who depart from the literal view because they feel they need to conform to science. So we presented you according to science, the counter arguments, those who are contrary to the young earth creationism. And we found out that all of them are based on some kind of assumptions. Okay? And some of them are basically a blatant assumption of atheism. Because there is no God, there is no center of the earth, therefore there must be a Big Bang theory, and so on. And that is actually guiding science by theology, and that's exactly the thing that they say they don't do, right? So we say we admit that we believe in God, and on that foundation we can harmonize the scientific facts with the truth. So today we are presenting you the positive proof for young earth creationism by science. You know, most people would think positive proof is the strongest support. However, we as young earth creationism, we recognize the epistemological fact that all sciences of origin are based on some kind of assumptions. Okay? And we admit it. We proclaim that. And the others, they don't admit it. And that makes them deceptive. So they need to admit it. Okay? All sciences of origin are based on some kind of assumptions. Therefore, the facts don't speak themselves. The interpretation is based on the fact and some kind of assumption. Then you get interpretation which supports your theory. Okay? So for us, the so-called positive proofs are secondary importance. The primary importance is to recognize the necessity of assumptions and faith. Okay? And after that, now we present so-called positive proofs. Okay? We also recognize that these things, scientific theories, are always prone to error, and they can always change. So that's why we don't put them as, factual foundation and the most important thing, of our theory. So they're just add-on supports. All right. Now here I will give you 10 scientific examples for young earth creationism. The first example we'll give is the decay of the magnetic field of the earth. So first, the decay of the magnetic field F-I-E of the earth. Okay, so the earth, we know that has a hard core. We have a hard core, and but on the inside there is a mantle, and in the middle, and on the inside there is a metal core. Okay, and in that metal core, the earth its density is basically irons. So we have a lot of iron in the middle, okay, the metal. And the metal core has an electric current in there. And the electric current produces a magnetic field. Okay? So according to electromagnetism, the magnetic field is because there is a rotating electric current that produces that field. And there is a scientist, Thomas Barnes. He teaches in University of Texas, El Paso. He observed the data from 1835 to 1970, and he found that the Earth's magnetic field, its strength decreases about 5% per century. So in every 100 years, the magnetic field reduced 5%. And then he goes backwards. He says, well, if before it was stronger, how long, if the rate continues, how long can the Earth be before the electric current that produces the field becomes so big that everything will melt? And he found out the Earth can be no longer than 10,000 years. So from this, he gets the Earth is less than 10,000 years. Okay? So only 10,000 years. And of course, this has been challenged by non-believing scientists. And they said, well, there are evidences that the Earth's magnetic field has reversed several times. For example, if you look at the Atlantic Ocean, the ocean floor, and you can see the wave patterns of magnetic field, and it's an indication of reversal. Well, there are two ways of explaining this. One is that you challenge the reversal theory, that the opening of the floor, if you have this separation of continents during the Great Flood, well, the continents separate and the water quickly will freeze, and the hot mantle, and the electric current flow will be disturbed because it's frozen, and then that could cause the reversal. Yeah, but the reversal there may be several times, but then later it seems to stabilize and continue to decay in the same rate. And so if you combine all the data now we have, it seems that, initially it was very strong, and it could not be no longer than 10,000 years ago. But during the Great Flood, there was several oscillations, and then it steadily declines again to the steady decline thing. And this is the best fit for now. And archaeologically, we have found the manifests, found out the objects that have magnetic fields in it, and it seems, since we can date them, seems that from this is a time of Christ. So before that is BC, after that is AD. So from 1000 BC to AD 1000, during that it seems to peaks at the time of Christ. And before that there were certain reversals, and before that you project it's still very strong, and then it can not be longer than 10,000 years. But anyway, this is one of the evidences that if you assume this uniformitarianism, the steadiness of the current rate of decline, then it can not longer than 10,000 years. If more than that, if you go any longer than that, then the Earth will become so strong in magnetic field, it will become a neutron star, that all the electrons will be stripped, and of course nothing can live on there. That's one example. Another example is that the helium in the rocks, okay, helium. Which is this one in chemical table, and it's the alpha particle. Okay, and in rocks. So we know that helium is the result of radioactive decay. There are radioactive isotopes, and when they decay, they usually have alpha particles or beta particles or gamma particles. Alpha particle is helium nucleus, and beta particle is electron, and the gamma particle is basically high energy light. And the alpha particle is the only one that has mass, and it has the mass of 4 and charge of 2, and but once it's released and it takes on an electron, it becomes helium, and helium is neutral in charge, and it's very easy to escape from the rocks. So unless the rocks froze very quickly, and it will have been gone. So when rocks are formed by a volcano or etc., at first it's liquid, right? And if it's not so solid, hardened, and the alpha particles would have been gone, the helium would have been gone. But if it's frozen very quickly, then it might keep it. And also, if the history is long, they would have all been gone. Okay, but if it's short, then you can keep it. There's a scientist called Robert Gentry in 1982. He found large amount of helium in zircons, which is zirconium silicide, and he found that the age of the rock can be no longer than he says is 5,600 plus or minus 2,000 years. So that's another example of the Earth can only be very short, very young, and these are solid scientific facts because in the rocks the helium particles, they are easy to escape. The fact that they are still there tells that the rock is young. Okay, and how about the salt in the sea? Okay, the third one, we have the salt in the sea. We know that the ocean has increases. The land and we have rivers that flow into the sea and bring the salt into it. And also there are underground releases of water. They're called the, what is called is that submarine groundwater discharge. Okay. And they also bring salt into it. So from the land and from under, they all bring salt into it. And the underground water discharge could bring up to 40%. But even if you don't count that, just consider from the land. And we will say the age of the ocean is younger than 62 million years. So we can see it's younger than 62 million years. Well, this is its maximum date, okay? It doesn't mean it has to be that old. But anyway, this is much, much less than the 4.5 billion years, right? So it doesn't match the current standard date given by the secularists. How about the fourth evidence is the missing supernova remnants. Okay. Missing supernova remnants, or we call it SNRs. Okay, supernova remnants. And we know that when stars burn off their energy, they will collapse. And once they collapse, the pressure will ignite a new round of nuclear reaction. And usually it's a fusion. And then it has so much energy, produces so much energy that it explodes. Okay? And when it explodes, it becomes a supernova. And a supernova will, first of all, it has 3 stages of development. The first stage, it will throw out matters. And in about 300 years, it goes to about 8 light hours big. And the second stage is it throws out radio waves. Okay, and in about 120,000 years, and its radius would become 10 parseconds, or about 300 light years, and 100 parsecond, about 326 light years. And in the third stage, it will just throw out heat, energy, and all the way to about up to 6 million years, and it can be as big as 420 parsecond. Okay, it's about 1,200 light years, that big. Okay, the supernova, if the universe is really that big, that old, okay, like 15 billion years old, if the universe is really that old, then we would expect about 5 first-stage supernova remnants in our galaxy. But we only observed 5. It's matches. Okay. Well, if it's if it's about 7, sorry, if it's 7 billion, it's only 7,000 years. The Earth is young. You also expect about 5, and we observed 5. Okay, so the first stage observation matches with any expectation of the age. How about the second stage one? You would expect in our galaxy to be about 2,360. But if it's a young Earth, then you expect 125. We actually observed about 200. So it matches the young Earth, not the old Earth. How about the third stage one? You would expect 5,000 if it's an old Earth in our galaxy. 0 in 7,000, a young Earth. We actually observed 0. So the observation matches with the young Earth. So this is less than 7,000 years. Okay, and the number 5 is the comets. Comets. We know that the Earth it rotates around the Sun, and the Earth goes in circular path. And outside of the solar system, there are right now 8 planets, and Pluto is considered now a dwarf planet. But anyway, the comets comes from very far path. They have very, very elliptic orbits, and they lose a lot of energy every time they come near the Sun, because they evaporate and they lose a lot of things. And the problem is, if they lose that much, then they can't live that long. You know, they can't. They can only come a few times, then they're gone. And there are 2 kinds of comets. One is short period, less than 200 years. The other is long period, more than 200 years. The short period comets would evaporate much faster. Okay, and the secularists have proposed. They know there's a problem. They have proposed several possible solutions. One, assume there is a called Oort cloud. There's something that's outside of the solar system, and the problem is never observed. And another is they assume that between Neptune and Pluto there is a series of things that's called the Kuiper belt. Okay, so either it's really outside the solar system or it's at the end of the solar system. They said there's a belt around the sun. And that we have observed some objects there. The problem is they are much larger than the comets. Comets are very small, and these are big things, and thousands of miles and not just a few miles big. And also their orbits are almost circular. So it's not so stretched, and they don't fit. And some people assume there may be interstellar origin between the stars. However, if that's the case, then the comets would have parabola-like path, not elliptical. Okay, it's because they have speed, higher than the escape speed. So they will come in and they will go. They will not repeat. But what we have, the comets, they repeat, right? So comets tells us that the universe cannot be that big either, the solar system. And we don't have an actual date, but the comets, I think just 10,000 years, something like that. It cannot be longer than that. Otherwise, all the comets have gone. Just think about the Halley comets. Last few times we saw them, it was much brighter. And the last time, 1984 or 89, it was very, very dark. So pretty soon, next time, 76 years later, it will be hardly visible. Okay, how about the next one? It's a lunar recession. The Earth loses its rotational speed because of tide. It slows it down. And whatever angular momentum the Earth lost must be picked up by the Moon because of the conservation of angular momentum. And so the Moon will recede, be a little further from the Earth every year. How much more? The Earth will be further about 4 centimeters or half an inch every year. And if the speed is the same, 1.37 billion years ago, the Earth would be starting on the surface of the Earth. But of course, if it was so close, the speed would be faster. So it cannot be that long. Anyway, this tells us this is less than 1.3 billion years. Okay, of course, that's the maximum date. It's not. It's much, much less than the 4.6 billion years. Again, it doesn't match the standard date for the Earth. The next one is, how about the dinosaur red blood? Dinosaur red blood cell. We have found there is a scientist called Mary Schweitzer in 1997. She found unfossilized dinosaur bones with blood cells and hemoglobin. And these hemoglobin has 4 peptide chains and 3 to 4 amino acids or more. And the limit of the survival for that would be 2.7 million years at freezing temperature, 180,000 years at 10 degrees centigrade, and 15,000 years at 20 degrees centigrade. So these have been in the regular temperature of a room temperature. So it actually would be shorter than that 20 degrees centigrade. So we will say it's less than 15,000 years. Okay. All right. And how about now the radio halos? Radio halos. In certain rocks, we found that the polonium, the radioactive polonium, it has very short half-life, and for it to have formed the halos, it must be formed and frozen very quickly, it tells us that the rocks were formed quickly in a very short time, and this forms tells us that the flood year, and in that flood year, basically tells you there must be a flood year, and when the anyway, this is all short, and at that time the radioactivity is actually faster than other times. And how about now the erosion of continents? We know that the continents they reduce its height because of rain and river and water. It throws things into the ocean. And on the average, let's say mountains lower by 35 to 750 inches per millennium. And near the rivers, it could be as high as 1,350 millimeters and per millennium. But anyway, we know that 93 miles of continental height would be eroded in 2.5 billion years, and that's very high. And in other words, if we have 4.5 billion years of the Earth, almost all of the continents would have been eroded. Everything would be under the sea. Okay. Some people say, well, maybe there are tectonic movements, and like the Himalayas rises up a little bit every year, but that speed is so slow it cannot counter the erosion. And in other words, this would be less than 2.5 billion years. But again, this is less than 4.5 billion years. Okay. So we can see from all of these, you combine, these are all talking about the highest the age, right? So you take the minimum, the smallest of these. You mean how small? Well, the smallest is about probably around 6,000, 7,000 years. You see, that's the maximum time of the Earth. These are from the positive support of science on young Earth creationism. There have been old examples that are not fitting to be used anymore. For a while, we thought that the moon would have a very thick layer of dust, because if its universe is very old, it pick up a lot of dust, and it have a thick layer of dust. So the Apollo's lunar capsules, they had big feet to stand on there, but they found out actually they have very thin dust. So now their estimate of the interstellar dusts are much fewer, and therefore that example is not fit to be used anymore. But again, this tells us so-called scientific theories are even facts. They don't speak by themselves. It's the assumption that produces the interpretation. And for us, right now, these examples supports the young Earth creationism, and therefore it's likely the truth.